Manchester United in their takeover, which is a depressing state of affairs because there's no takeover happening, at least not a full takeover at this point, because Sheikh Jassim and the Qatari consortium have officially pulled out of any kind of bid. It seems like they were bidding against themselves for full ownership anyway, but the money they were offering, despite it being double what the club was worth, was still not enough for the Glazers, which says all you need to know about our current ownership. I mean, the table on the table at the minute is a 25% stake in the club from Ineos Group, right? And Sir Jim Ratcliffe. I don't know what that means in terms of the club's ownership going forward and how much influence he's going to have. There's no guarantees for him as a businessman that he's going to get full ownership eventually, but I think he's been led with that kind of lure, isn't he? And it's just to get him to invest. But the money he's paying for 25% is ridiculous as well. So I think he's paying over the odds. It's a bit of a mess, Dave, isn't it? And it feels like the only people that are going to benefit from any of this are the Glazers once again.
Oh, they come out on top, don't they? That's the story of it, really. And I think it offers more questions than answers.
Yeah.
For me, there's so many questions, and that's almost scary, really, in a way. And I hope there's some transparency that's brought out about this. And apparently, there's a board meeting on Thursday about whether they're going to ratify the deal, and the board are going to vote on whether it's pushed through or not. And for me, I think the big question for me is whether that's going to eventually lead to a full takeover, which is ideally what needs to happen. The other thing for me that is crazy and almost unthinkable is I read today that he's not going to have a full handle on business decisions, although there's going to be some things that I imagine will be put into place, obviously stipulations, and probably that he's obligated to have a buyout in the next 3 or 4 years, which you would think, because it would be unthinkable of a business and to punt all this money and investment into a club and see no return on it. Not just obviously on the business side, but on the sporting side. What is also strange is that he's apparently going to have footballing hands-on management, even though he owns 25%. I mean, that says a lot to me about the Glazers more than anything, is that they are happy for that to happen. But it also says to me a lot about their standing in the club and how it tells a lot about how they've actually, managed the club from the beginning, to be honest. It feels like they're fed up. It feels like they've had enough. And that's clear to me, because they want a way out, but they want a way out maximising the profits from the club and maximising the funds that they're going to get from the club. And that's there for all to see, is that it seems as though, obviously, Qatar were the only all-in. They wanted the club 100%. And it almost seems like the Glazers want an involvement in a club without having to do a lot, basically. And they want to be making money off of it. And that's the sad thing for me.
The 25% ownership, conceding that would give them that as well, wouldn't it? To give them somebody to trot out and make a scapegoat as well, because they're the ones making the decisions. But I think for fans, it's just more uncertainty that bothers me. Like you say, the amount of questions this raises about the future of the club. How long are we talking before they're looking for a full sell? Like a year, 10 years? It could be a decade of the same old stuff, couldn't it?
If he's only managing the footballing side, but then he's only got a 25% stake in the business, then how do you agree on investment funds? Because the money's still going to be coming. The money's still going to be coming from the club and should be coming from the owners, which is still the Glazers.
Well, look what happened at Arsenal when they had joint ownership and more than one billionaire trying to run the club. It was a disaster, wasn't it? And I feel that's going to be the case. It's just a clash of egos and just more uncertainty. I mean, from an outsider looking in, Myles, I mean, you've made it quite clear about United and the state of the club and, how you feel for us. And you look at what could have been, which would be a Qatari takeover. And I still feel incredibly uneasy about the thought of that as well, for various other reasons, as we know. But what's your take on the situation now, where that's now no longer an option, but this weird halfway house is the next step?
I think the Glazers have done a phenomenal business job, if I'm totally honest with you both. And I think that's the sad reality. If we treat this as what it is, a business to them, let's be honest, they've got no compassionate connection to the club or the fans. It's not a footballing project for them. It is a business. It's a business that they purchased for just under £800 million, and they're about to sell a quarter of it for 1.7 billion.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal business to them because they're doing all the things you've just said. They're keeping someone on board that can be a scapegoat for the problems and giving him the football side, which means that it's all the front-facing things. So any issues will be a problem. That opens up so many questions to me, because where do you draw the line? What becomes a footballing decision? Because spending 250 million on players to improve a squad sounds like a footballing decision, but it's very clearly a business decision, because where do you get that money from? So it's such a weird thing to define as a part of a football club. But the Qatari bid to me was a bizarre one in the first place, because the Glazers didn't want to sell the whole club. Qatar were trying to sell this passion project of, this is what we're going to turn Man United into. But why would the Glazers care? Once they've sold and they get nothing from it, they don't want that. They don't care. All that will do is kind of raise the profile of an asset that they used to have. They want to keep hold of the asset. And right now what they've done is they're going to get a massive injection of cash. They can continue to let Man United kind of be almost self-sufficient and pay for itself while they kind of tick over in the background and bring in the profits. Let Jim Ratcliffe kind of promote it as his passion project, because supposedly I think his son's a massive Man United fan, and this is more about a project for him rather than a business decision. So you've got someone who is going to do all your dirty work for you. I think it's an excellent bit of business from the Glazers, but it doesn't put Man United in an any more favourable position. No. And that doesn't surprise me at all. It's just, you're right when you mention Arsenal as a comparison, because the lack of certainty that's going to follow Man United after this is huge, because I really can't get my head around how the Glazers view a football club as anything other than a business commodity, when they're saying things like, you can run our football division of Manchester United Football Club.
Yeah.
That is the only division.
Like, that's a small fraction of it.
Yeah, the commercial decisions you make are huge, but they are there, in theory, to elevate the football club. That's what it has always been. But it's not to them, and why should it be at this point? Because they don't get love from the fans, but what they do get is money. And realistically, any other business in the world operates that way. So why are we surprised that a footballing club that is arguably one of the biggest in the world is going to operate in the same way?
You were talking about what a footballing decision would be, and I think stadium and infrastructure as well kind of falls under that. Is that
real estate?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a big one. And that's a big one that the fans want resolving as soon as possible. And I honestly think this part ownership is going to set United back another decade. I really do. It's not looking pretty, Dave, is it? But I know the Man United supporters just are kind of driving hard looking for answers. Good luck to them. I really hope they get some, and I really hope they dig in deep to kind of get what they need. And I think as United fans, I'm keen to know what you think, Dave. What do we do? How can we protest? How can we hit the Glazers where it hurts? What's the solution here for us? Because it's a helpless situation otherwise, isn't it?
I think the only way that they'd make a difference would be to protest in the form of not turning up to games. And the reality of that is not going to happen. As sad as it is. So there's nothing we can do. That's the reality. There's nothing we can do as fans, unless it's the extremes of empty stadiums in games, which won't happen because of obviously the massive fan base that the club's got internationally.
The massive soft fan base as well, because the core of Man United fans could easily organise some sort of walkout or a lack of attendance, but you do just open the doors then to people that wouldn't otherwise get an opportunity to see Man United and aren't invested in the way that like you two are, for example, or season ticket holders are. Like, they're bigger than the problem, Man United. That's the fundamentals of
They'll
this.
Always fill the seats, won't they?
Yeah. Empty stadiums and protests that big that games get called off. That's it. That's the only way that.
But then you've got the balance of disrupting the squad and the team and results on the pitch. I mean, do we want the team to get relegated in a sense, just to kind of prove a point?
For a long-term gain, I'd happily see United get relegated if the Glazers left. And we had someone coming in full takeover. I'd actually, because we've suffered that. It sounds ridiculous because I think obviously supporting the club from a very young age, you're used to obviously seeing winning, week after week. There's that mentality of winning and the history of it all. And I think it actually, for instance, watching the Beckham documentary actually made me realise what this club is all about. And it's not all about that anymore. The sad reality, really, especially when you see what the club's been through. And I'd be happy to take a hit, to be honest. If you look at Juventus, they went down for a number of years. Rangers, they've come back from it. These clubs do come back from these downturns in these bad years that they have, and I've just had enough of it, really.
Quick question for you both, if you don't mind. Is this better than nothing? Because there is another view of it that actually Ratcliffe's been really smart. And
nothing.
Once he's in, it might be easier for him to take full control and deal with the Glazers long term. It's not going to happen in the short term.
That implies trust in the Glazers.
At least,
though.
is it good to say that it's at least one step in the right direction? It might not be the whole journey, but you'd probably rather, if we're honest, have Jim Ratcliffe than the Qatari bid, right? And you've now got to a point where a quarter of that job is done. Is that better than nothing? Is there something to be positive about?
No, because I don't think... I mean, that's implying that you can trust the Glazers to then foresee, a sale of the club, a full sale of the club eventually. I don't think that's in their plan. I really don't. I think as long as United is the cash cow that it is to them, they'll just keep stringing him along. And I hope he's got some kind of deal in place, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, to say, this is what I expect by this length of time, just so,
He's a very smart man. I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Yeah. I mean, we probably won't ever know that until it actually comes to fruition, but I just don't trust them as far as I can throw them. And I don't know how he's getting into bed with them, to be honest, because that just makes him look worse.
I think until we know a little bit more about, obviously, what's going to happen. But for me, if nothing were to happen, if both parties, obviously, Qataris have pulled out, if Ratcliffe was to pull out as well, the Glazers are in a corner, really, because the way the club's being ran at the minute, if you look at the balance books, the finances, it's not sustainable. So they have to do something. They would have to do something in the next 2 years because the club
they've done it.
It's been ran into the ground.
They've done it. They've just brought in 1.7 billion by the looks of things. That's just crazy. And the thing I really want to know is, what do you do between the two of them? So let's say the first thing Ratcliffe says is, I want to renovate Old Trafford. I want to expand the stadium. I want to make it the best stadium in England. Does he put 25% of the money down? Because then you're still asking the Glazers for the rest. And they'll say no. So if Ratcliffe doesn't have a controlling stake, what's the point in 25% of Man United right now? Because at the end of the day, he's not going to be a decision maker. The board will still come back and knock back any of the things that they want to do that's going to cost the Glazers anything. All right, they've got a quarter of the price off now, but they've made it very clear they don't want to put too much into the bigger things. They might invest in players here and there, and they'll spend 80 million on Antony. But when it comes to the things that are actually going to improve the infrastructure, they've really held back for some reason. And I don't understand how someone else being involved changes that.